Collision course, the marketing department at Prism. Innovations fell silent as Eleanor Chen's heels clicked against the polished floor. She moved with purpose, tablet in hand, her expression unreadable behind tortoiseshell glasses. The morning light caught the auburn highlights in her dark hair, swept into a practical bun that meant business. "You're late," Julian Blackwood remarked, without looking up from his laptop. His voice carried that infuriating calm that made Eleanor's jaw clench. "Traffic was impossible," she replied, sliding into the seat directly across from him. "I suppose you wouldn't know, living 3 blocks away." Several colleagues exchanged glances. The weekly strategy meeting hadn't officially started, but the Eleanor Julian show had begun right on schedule. Director Olivia Winters cleared her throat. "Now that we're all here, let's review the Luminex campaign numbers." Eleanor pulled up. Her presentation, graphs meticulously prepared, analyzes razor-sharp. She'd worked until 2 a.m. perfecting it. "As you can see, our demographic reach exceeded projections by 17%, primarily in the 25 to 34 urban professional segment. Impressive." Olivia nodded. "Though I wonder if we're celebrating prematurely?" Julian interjected, his British accent somehow making the interruption sound intellectual rather than rude. He leaned forward, sleeves of his charcoal shirt rolled to his elbows. "The engagement metrics tell a different story. We're getting eyes, but not hearts." Eleanor bristled. "If you'd let me finish, you'd see that conversion rates are up 12% from last quarter. In an expanding market where our competitors are seeing 15 to 20% growth," countered, sliding his own tablet forward, "we're underperforming. Based on what benchmark? The industry average is 8%. Since when has Prism aimed for average?" The air crackled between them. Eleanor's fingers tightened around her stylus, while Julian's blue eyes remained maddeningly steady. This was their dance. Performed weekly for an audience of increasingly uncomfortable colleagues. Since Julian had transferred from the London office 18 months ago, he and Eleanor had developed a professional rivalry that bordered on mythology within the company. They represented opposing philosophies, her data-driven precision against his intuitive creativity. Perhaps Director Winters intervened. "We can use both perspectives to strengthen our approach." The meeting continued, tension ebbing and flowing, like tide. When Eleanor proposed expanding their social media strategy, Julian questioned its authenticity. When Julian suggested a more narrative-driven approach, Eleanor highlighted the lack of measurable metrics by meeting's end. 3 colleagues had mysteriously received urgent texts requiring their immediate attention, and the marketing assistant had developed a sudden interest in the ceiling tiles. "Eleanor Julian, stay behind, please," Olivia requested as others filed out with visible relief. When the door closed, Olivia removed her glasses. "A Horizon project launches in 3 weeks. It's the biggest campaign of the year, and I need my 2 best minds working together, not against each other." "We're simply ensuring all angles are considered," Eleanor offered diplomatically. "By systematically dismantling each other's ideas?" Olivia arched an eyebrow. "I'm assigning you both as co-leads. Shared responsibility, shared credit, shared consequences if it fails. Figure out how to collaborate, or I'll find people who can." After Olivia left, silence settled between them. Eleanor gathered her materials, refusing to acknowledge the weight of Julian's gaze. "Dinner tonight," he said suddenly. "To discuss strategy." It wasn't a question. Eleanor looked up, surprised by the lack of antagonism in his voice. 7 o'clock. "That Italian place on Maple Street," she countered, establishing her own authority in this unexpected détente. Julian nodded once, the barest hint of something respect flickering across his features. 7 it is. Neither could have predicted how that dinner would alter the carefully constructed battlefield they'd built between them. Neither realized that their legendary office conflict concealed something far more complex than simple rivalry. The office lights dimmed as they departed separately, maintaining appropriate professional distance. What happened after hours remained unwritten for now. Crescendo of conflict, the Horizon project consumed them. For 3 weeks, Eleanor and Julian circled each other in a delicate dance of collaboration and competition. Their dinner at Vincenzo's had established an uneasy truce, punctuated by moments of surprising synchronicity when their ideas aligned perfectly. The visuals need to be bolder, Julian insisted, spreading mock-ups across the conference table late one evening. The office had emptied hours ago, leaving them alone in the soft glow of overhead lights. People remember what moves them emotionally, not what persuades them logically. Eleanor studied the designs, tapping her pen against her lower lip. Data suggests otherwise. Brand recall is 30% higher when information is presented in a structured format. People aren't spreadsheets, Eleanor. And marketing isn't performance art, Julian. Their eyes met across the table, a familiar spark igniting. But something had shifted since they began working directly together. The antagonism remained, but beneath it ran a current of something neither was ready to name. "Show me your data," Julian said suddenly, moving to her side of the table. She blinked, surprised by his concession. "Really? Really?" He settled into the chair beside her, close enough that she caught the faint scent of his sandalwood cologne. "Want to understand how you see the world." For the next hour, Eleanor walked him through her research, audience segments, behavioral patterns. Julian listened intently, asking questions that revealed a sharp, analytical mind beneath his creative exterior. When he occasionally touched her screen to highlight a point, his fingers brushed against hers, sending an unexpected warmth through her hand. "Your approach is methodical," he acknowledged when she finished. "I respect that." The compliment, simple but sincere, caught her off guard. "Your creative instincts are unusually accurate," she offered in return, the closest thing to praise she'd given him. Julian smiled, not his usual confident smirk, but something softer. "We might make a decent team after all, Chen." The project deadline loomed closer. Days blurred into nights as they refined the campaign, their professional conflicts no less intense, but somehow transformed. In meetings, they still challenged each other relentlessly, causing colleagues to exchange knowing glances and whispers about World War III in marketing. But after hours, working alone in conference rooms or at coffee shops, they discovered a rhythm, his creativity tempered by her precision, her analysis enhanced by his intuition. "You're impossible," Eleanor muttered one night as Julian dismantled her carefully constructed timeline. "You're inflexible," he countered, but there was no malice in his voice. Instead, a hint of affection colored his frustration. "Prefer determined." "Of course you do." He glanced up, blue eyes crinkling at the corners. "That's what makes you exceptional." The word hung between them. Exceptional. Not difficult or stubborn, the criticisms she'd grown accustomed to hearing throughout her career. Exceptional. Eleanor busied herself with her laptop, hoping he wouldn't notice the flush creeping up her neck. "The presentation to the executive team is tomorrow. We should focus." Focus became increasingly difficult as midnight approached. Fatigue lowered their professional guards. Julian loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with lean muscle. Eleanor removed her blazer, kicked off her heels beneath the table. They ordered takeout, sharing containers of pad thai and actually laughing about Director Winter's infamous motivational speeches. "You know why I challenge you in meetings?" Julian asked suddenly, twirling noodles with chopsticks. Eleanor paused, wary of the personal turn. "Because you enjoy being difficult? Because you're the only person worth challenging?" His voice dropped lower. "Everyone else just agrees with whatever I say." "Poor you," she said dryly, but something fluttered in her chest. "I'm serious, Eleanor. You make me better." The air between them thickened. Eleanor looked up from her food, to find Julian watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a moment, she allowed herself to see him not as her professional adversary, but as a man brilliant, complex, unexpectedly vulnerable in this confession. The moment stretched, taut with possibility, until Eleanor's phone chimed with a message from Olivia, ready for tomorrow. Reality crashed back. Eleanor stood abruptly, gathering her things. "It's late. We should both get some rest before the presentation." Julian watched her retreat behind her professional facade. "Eleanor," he said softly as she reached the door. She paused without turning. "See you tomorrow." Something in the way he said her name, like it was something precious, Something sacred followed her into the night, echoing in her mind long after she'd left him behind. Resonant Frequencies, the Horizon project launched to universal acclaim. The executive team praised their innovative synthesis of data-driven strategy and emotional storytelling. Director Winters beamed like a proud parent as industry publications featured their campaign. Prism's stock rose 3 points the week following the launch. In the aftermath of their success, Eleanor and Julian maintained their public persona, still arguing in meetings, still challenging each other's ideas, but something fundamental had changed. Colleagues noticed the difference, how Julian would occasionally defer to Eleanor's judgment, how she sometimes built upon his suggestions instead of dismantling them. The annual company retreat is next weekend, Olivia announced during Friday's staff meeting. Attendance is mandatory. 3 days at Lakeview Resort, team building, strategy sessions, and hopefully some actual relaxation. Eleanor suppressed a groan. 3 days of forced socialization in the mountains hardly qualified as relaxation in her book. I hear there's an open bar, Julian murmured beside her, somehow having claimed the seat next to hers. You might need it if they bring back the trust falls. She bit back a smile. I'd rather fall than catch you. Liar, he whispered. And the simple word carried a weight that made her pulse quicken. The retreat dawned crisp and clear, autumn painting the mountainside in fiery hues. Eleanor packed practical clothing, minimal makeup, and 3 novels she had no intention of sharing with colleagues. Professional distance remained her most comfortable strategy. That strategy crumbled precisely for hours after arrival. When Director Winters announced the weekend's teams for the various activities, Eleanor and Julian, you'll be partners for all exercises. Of course we will, Eleanor muttered. Julian leaned closer. Afraid you can't resist me for 3 whole days. Afraid you can't keep up with me, she returned smoothly. His low chuckle followed her as they moved toward their first challenge, a problem-solving exercise requiring teams to build a functioning bridge from limited materials, physics suggests. This design won't hold, Eleanor argued, sketching alternatives. Physics isn't everything, Julian countered, continuing to arrange the materials his way. To her astonishment, his bridge not only worked but held more weight than any other team's. Creation. How did you know? She asked as they walked toward the next activity. Julian shrugged. I built model planes as a child. Some lessons in structural integrity stick with you. This pattern repeated throughout the day, Julian revealing hidden depths. Eleanor discovering that her carefully constructed image of him required significant revision. He spoke French with the resort's chef, knew constellations by their scientific and mythological names, and during team trivia displayed an encyclopedic knowledge of 1960s soul music that left her genuinely impressed. Evening found them on the resort's terrace, the day's activities complete. Stars pricked the darkening sky while lanterns cast golden light across the gathered colleagues. Eleanor nursed a glass of Cabernet, standing slightly apart from the group, when Julian appeared. Beside her? Not socializing? He asked, leaning against the railing. I exceed my quota during office hours. Ah, yes. The infamous Eleanor Chen, social battery. Legend says it has the capacity of a 1990s flip phone. She laughed despite herself.
Oh.
Did you just compare me to obsolete technology? Vintagey corrected, eyes dancing with mischief. Rare, valuable. Eleanor turned toward the view, hoping the dimming light concealed the color in her cheeks. You're surprisingly good at this. At what? Charm? She took another sip of wine. No wonder half the office is in love with you. Only half. I'm losing my touch. He moved closer, their shoulders nearly touching. But there's only one person's opinion I particularly care about. The night air suddenly felt insufficient for breathing. Eleanor met his gaze, searching for the mockery or challenge she'd grown accustomed to finding there. Instead, she saw only earnest intensity. Julian... Music drifted from the resort speakers, a jazz quartet playing something soulful and slow. Other colleagues began pairing off, swaying to the melody. Dance with me, Julian said softly. Everyone. We'll see. Let them. He held out his hand, palm up, an invitation, not a demand. Eleanor hesitated, years of professional caution warring with the increasingly undeniable pull between them. Finally, she placed her hand in his and allowed him to lead her to a darkened corner of the terrace. His hand settled at her waist, warm and steady. She rested her palm against his shoulder, feeling the solid strength beneath his sweater. They moved together, finding rhythm without discussion. Like their bodies had been having a conversation, their minds were only beginning to understand. "Why do you keep your brilliance hidden?" he asked, voice low near her ear. "What do you mean?" "Downplay yourself. Your ideas, your influence. In meetings, you present data instead of vision, even though you have both." Eleanor stiffened. "Not everyone gets to be bold and charismatic. Some of us have to work twice as hard for half the recognition." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Because you're a woman. And I've been making it harder, haven't I? Challenging you publicly? It's fine. It's not." His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "I never meant to undermine you. If never met anyone who matches me thought for thought, who doesn't back down, who makes me question my own certainties." The music swelled around them, and Eleanor found herself drawing imperceptibly closer. "Is that why you transferred from London? You needed someone to challenge you?" Something flashed across his features, vulnerability, quickly. Masked. London had its own ... complications. But finding you here was unexpected. "A revelation? Finding me?" She echoed. His eyes held hers, midnight blue in the lantern light. "Eleanor," he said, her name a whisper between them. Not a declaration, not yet, but a recognition of something neither had been willing to name. The first time since they'd met, Eleanor didn't have a ready response. A sharp retort, a data point to counter his claim. She simply allowed herself to be held, to move with him under the stars, to acknowledge the resonance between them that had nothing to do with professional rivalry and everything to do with recognition of seeing and being seen completely. Dissonant harmony, their return to Prism brought new complications. The retreat had altered something fundamental between them, not erasing their differences, but transforming them into complementary forces rather than opposing ones. In meetings, they still debated, but colleagues noticed the change in tone. It's the underlying current of mutual respect, the occasional shared glance that spoke volumes. "Something's different," Olivia remarked to Eleanor one afternoon, closing her office door. "For privacy, between you and Julian," Eleanor maintained her professional composure. "We've reached a better working arrangement." Olivia's knowing smile suggested she suspected more. "Well, whatever it is, keep it up. The team dynamics have improved tremendously." What Eleanor couldn't tell Olivia was how thoroughly Julian had begun to dismantle her carefully constructed boundaries. How they'd fallen into the habit of working late together, ordering dinner, talking until security reminded them the building was closing. How he'd begun bringing her coffee each morning, prepared exactly as she liked it, with 1 sugar and a splash of almond milk. How he'd taken to texting her outside of work hours, sharing obscure articles related to their projects, or simply sending a particularly striking sunset from his apartment window. Nothing unprofessional had occurred. No lines crossed. Yet Eleanor found herself in unmapped territory, navigating feelings she'd never allowed herself to acknowledge in a professional context. 6 weeks after the retreat, the email arrived. Subject line, "Opportunity in Singapore, the prestigious." Klein & Associates wanted her as their new marketing director for the Asia-Pacific region. Double her current salary. A penthouse apartment. Complete creative control. It was everything she'd worked toward. The recognition, the advancement, the validation. Eleanor sat alone in her office, staring at the offer letter. The rational decision was clear. Yet something held her back. Something with blue eyes and a British accent. Something that had somehow become essential to her days. "You've been avoiding me," Julian said from her doorway, startling her from her thoughts. He closed the door behind him, leaning against it. 3 days of minimal eye contact and single-word responses.
"What's happened?"
Email, though not quickly enough. Julian's perceptive gaze caught the movement. "New job offer?" he asked, voice carefully neutral. "Klein & Associates in Singapore." Ah, a wealth of emotion in a single syllable. When would you leave? Haven't accepted yet. Hope flickered across his features before he masked it. You will. It makes sense professionally. Julian moved. Further into her office, perching on the edge of her desk. Close enough that she could see the faint stubble along his jaw, smell the bergamot notes of his cologne, and personally, Leonard stood, needing distance from his proximity. Her colleagues. Julian, professional considerations come first. Is that all we are? His voice dropped lower. Colleagues. What else would you call it? I don't know, he admitted, running a hand through his hair in a rare display of uncertainty. But it's more than professional respect that keeps me awake thinking about you. More than collegial concern that makes me bring you coffee every morning just to see your first smile of the day? Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. Julian, we can't. Why not? He stood now too, closing the distance between them. Because of office politics? Because it's complicated? Or because you're afraid? I'm not afraid, she said automatically, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Then why run halfway across the world? This isn't about you. But even as she said it, Eleanor knew it wasn't entirely true. Singapore represented more than professional advancement. It offered escape from the increasingly undeniable feelings Julian evoked. Look me in the eyes, he said softly, and tell me you don't feel what's happening between us. Eleanor met his gaze, intending to deny everything. The words died on her lips. How could she lie when he was looking at her like that, like she was the answer to questions he'd been asking his entire life? It doesn't matter what I feel, she said instead. Right. We work together. It's complicated. Simple things are rarely worth fighting for, and if it ends badly, if we destroy both our professional reputations. Julian stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Eleanor Chen, always calculating the risks. His hand lifted, hesitating a moment before gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear.
What about calculating?
What you might gain. Her breath caught at the contact. The offer expires next week, she whispered. I need to decide. Then let me give you something else to consider. Slowly, deliberately giving her every chance to retreat, Julian leaned forward. His lips brushed against hers, the lightest touch. A question rather than a demand. Eleanor remained frozen for one heartbeat, too, before something inside her surrendered. Her hands found his shoulders as she pressed closer, deepening the kiss. Time suspended. The office around them faded. Years of tension, of verbal sparring, of denied attraction crystallized into this single point of connection. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him as though she might disappear if he didn't hold on tightly enough when they finally broke apart. Both breathing unevenly, Julian rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he whispered. It's not for Prism, not for me, but for what we might become together. Eleanor closed her eyes, overwhelmed by competing desires, professional ambition warring with personal longing. I need time to think. Julian nodded, reluctantly releasing her. For what it's worth, he said quietly as he moved toward the door, no one has ever seen me the way you do. No one has ever challenged me to be better, to be more honest, to be worthy. He paused at the threshold, turning back with vulnerability etched across his features. Singapore is an incredible opportunity. But ask yourself this. In that corner office on the other side of the world, who will push you to be your best self? Who will see youth a real you, brilliant and stubborn and extraordinary the way I do? With that, he was gone, leaving Eleanor alone with an impossible choice and the lingering sensation of his lips on hers. Perfect cadence. Eleanor did not sleep that night, or the next. The decision before her stretched like an unbridgeable chasm. Singapore or Julian. Career advancement or emotional risk. The path she'd always planned or the one she'd never allowed herself to imagine. On the third sleepless night, she found herself driving through empty streets until she reached Prism's building. Security recognized her, allowing her access despite the late hour. The marketing floor was dark and silent as she made her way to her office, seeking clarity in familiar surroundings. Instead, she found Julian. He sat at his desk across the open workspace, illuminated only by his computer screen, tie loosened, hair disheveled from running his hands through it, a habit when he was deep in thought. He looked up at the sound of her footsteps, surprise giving way to something softer. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. Eleanor shook her head, moving closer. "I've been thinking about what you said, and I'm terrified," the admission cost. Her vulnerability never coming easily. "I've spent my entire career ensuring that my professional value was undeniable, unassailable." She swallowed. "I've never prioritized personal happiness over professional advancement." Julian stood, crossing the distance between them. "What if you could have both?" "How?" He took her hands in his, thumbs brushing across her knuckles.
Us.
"With Olivia, yesterday. About us. About Singapore." Eleanor tensed. "Julian, you had no right." "Hear me out," he said gently. "I didn't make any decisions for you. Simply asked about possibilities." "What possibilities?" "Prism is opening a branch. Office in Singapore next year. Olivia had planned to offer you the directorship eventually, but she's willing to accelerate the timeline. You'd have the international position, the salary increase, the recognition you deserve, and you'd still be part of Prism." Hope fluttered in Eleanor's chest. "And you?" "I'd stay here initially. We'd have to navigate long distance for a while." His eyes held hers steadily. "But I have considerable vacation time accumulated. There's always video calls. You'd do that for me?" "For us," he corrected, "and it wouldn't be forever. Once the Singapore office is established, there might be opportunities for me there as well." Eleanor studied him, this man who had been her professional nemesis and was now offering to rearrange his life around her dreams. "Why would you make such sacrifices?" "Because somewhere between arguing with you about market segmentation and watching you demolish my campaign strategies, I fell in love with you, Eleanor Chen." The words hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned. No clever banter, no professional veneer, just truth. "I don't expect you to say it back," he continued, when she remained silent. "I know this is overwhelming, but I needed you to understand what's at stake for me. It's not just about keeping a talented colleague at Prism. It's about not losing the woman who has become essential to my happiness." Eleanor felt tears threatening an unfamiliar vulnerability she wouldn't have allowed anyone else to witness. "I've spent so long defining myself by my achievements," she whispered. "By what I accomplish, not how I feel. I know." Julian brushed away a tear that had escaped despite her efforts. "Your ambition is part of what I love about you. I would never ask you to diminish yourself if I took the Klein offer instead." Pain flickered across his features, but he answered, "Honestly, I would be devastated. I would support your decision because I want you to have everything you deserve." In that moment, looking at this man who challenged her and respected her in equal measure, who saw her completely and loved what he saw, Eleanor recognized the truth she'd been avoiding. Her feelings for Julian had long since transcended professional respect or physical attraction. What existed between them was deeper, more profounder recognition of kindred spirits, of complementary souls. "I don't want to choose," she said finally. "Between my career and you?" "Then don't," he smiled, the one she'd come to treasure not. His public smile, polished and confident, but his private one, slightly crooked and achingly sincere. "Take the Prism Singapore position. Let me visit you disgustingly often. Let's see if we can build something that spans oceans. If it doesn't work, then we'll have tried something extraordinary." He cupped her face gently. But I think we will work, Eleanor.
No.
We're already the most effective partnership in this company. Imagine what we could be if we stopped fighting what we feel." Eleanor made her decision not with data points or risk analyses, but with the certainty that had been growing in her heart for months. She rose on tiptoes, pressing her lips to his in answer. This kiss held promise rather than question, certainty rather than exploration. Julian's arms encircled her, lifting her slightly off her feet as he deepened the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, Eleanor whispered against his lips, I love you too, you impossible man. Joy transformed his features. Say that again? I love you, she repeated, the words becoming more natural with each utterance. Though I'll probably still argue with you in meetings, I would expect nothing less. He laughed, the sound vibrating through her. In fact, I'm counting on it. 6 months later, Eleanor stood on the balcony of her Singapore apartment, watching the city lights glimmer against the night sky. Behind her, Julian moved about the kitchen, preparing dinner during one of his now monthly visits. Their relationship had developed its own rhythm: video calls, shared projects across time zones, passionate reunions. To the surprise of exactly no one at Prism, their professional dynamic remained unchanged in public settings. They still challenged each other in meetings, still defended opposing viewpoints, still occasionally rolled their eyes at each other's suggestions. The difference was what happened afterward: the private smiles, the gentle touches, the profound understanding that their conflicts arose not from antagonism, but from mutual respect and a shared commitment to excellence. Julian asked, joining her on the balcony. A glass of wine in each hand, Eleanor accepted the glass, leaning into him as his arms settled around her waist. About how sometimes the most unexpected path leads exactly where you're meant to be. Poetic. He teased, "Who are you, and what have you done with my pragmatic Eleanor? You're Eleanor?" She raised an eyebrow. Rather presumptuous, Blackwood. Accurate, he countered, pressing a kiss to her temple. As you well know, and she did know. Despite the physical distance, despite the professional complexities, despite all rational arguments against office romances, they had found something rare, something worth protecting, something worth fighting for. In the boardroom, they remained formidable opponents, challenging each other to greater heights of creativity and precision. But in private moments like this, they were simply Eleanor and Julian, two people who had discovered that the greatest professional partnership could arise from the most profound personal connection. "I have news," Julian said, turning her to face him. "Olivia called this morning. We're expanding my role to include Asia-Pacific oversight." Eleanor's eyes widened. "You're moving to Singapore? If that's what you want?" His gaze searched hers. "Or we could split time between here and London. Create our own arrangement." "Our own arrangement," she repeated, warmth spreading through her chest. I like the sound of that. As the city hummed around them and stars appeared overhead, Eleanor reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from adversaries to allies, from colleagues to partners in every sense. Their story had unfolded not in grand gestures but in small moments of recognition, in challenges issued and met, in the gradual understanding that what looked like conflict from the outside was actually perfect harmony when viewed from within. Julian pulled her closer, his heartbeat steady against her cheek. "So what do you think? Ready to take on the world together?" Eleanor smiled up at him, no longer afraid of what she felt, no longer needing to hide behind professional distance. "I thought we already were."